Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar with Left Brain Professionals. We have Robert Jones with us for another awesome webinar for government contract accounting specialist on the benefits of automated bookkeeping for government contractors. Really important topic and very timely. So let's keep rolling. My name is Liz Brigson. I'm Director of Partnerships and Education for Incorsa. It's a pleasure to be with you to host you today. My goal is to help you get the most out of the presentation. So if you want to say hello using the GoToWebinar control panel, I see that Deirdre already has said hello from Texas. So welcome. Thanks for being with us. You can download the handouts from the GoToWebinar control panel, and you can also download the handouts from your Incorsa dashboard. You'll want to keep those for future reference. Today's webinar is an hour and a half. We will launch 7 polling questions in order to earn CPE credit. You'll want to respond to at least 5 of those 7 questions. After the webinar, 1 hour after the webinar concludes, you can access your CPE certificate from your Incorsa dashboard. If you have any questions at all about logistics about the webinar during the webinar, just type me a question in the GoToWebinar questions box. And if it's after the webinar, just reach out to us at support@incorsa.com. Well, Robert is coming to us today live from Coronado Island, where Robert and his team are hosting the very first annual Government Contract Accounting Summit. There's Stephen in the background. Hello. And it's so exciting that you are on site, that you're able to take some time, Robert, to talk about this important topic about automated bookkeeping. And just to tell you a little bit about Robert, if you've joined us before, you know that Robert is a phenomenal speaker, super knowledgeable in this space and in this industry. He's a government contract and accounting expert. He's the founder of Left Brain Professionals, where he really takes his experience as a defense contracts manager, a controller. He's also worked in business management, compliance, and operations, and really brings that to you to help you understand how to properly structure your accounting for government contracts and make your firm and help your clients and your organization be more successful. So Robert, thanks so much for being here. Maybe you can tell us just a little bit about what your team's up to with the summit conference that's going on, and then dive into the topic.
Sure. Well, thank you again. It's always a pleasure to be here with you, Liz, and the rest of the Incorsa team and our attendees. We are live. We are in Coronado. For those of you who are maybe familiar with San Diego, we're at the Lowe's Coronado. Beautiful location. We're here putting on the GovCon Accounting Summit. So today we're just in the middle of a couple of special pre-con workshops. Tomorrow kicks off the main summit, so you haven't missed much yet. There's still an opportunity to participate for Wednesday and Thursday. You can still, I think between those 2 days, you can still get up to 13 CPE credits. And right now we're running a last minute promo, so to get 25% off, we'll get that code out to you. It's going to be LAST, L-A-S-T 2021. We'll get that over to Liz so she can share it out with everybody in the link. So you still have an opportunity to register and take 25% off to participate in this year's GovCon Accounting Summit. All right, with that, let's dive into today's topic. We've got a lot to talk about in our roughly 90 minutes together here. Again, we're here to talk about the benefits of automated bookkeeping for government contractors. For those of you who might be new, again, Left Brain Professionals, we are a boutique accounting firm and that we work only with government contractors. We specialize in accounting system design, implementation, and audit support. Some of the tasks that we help clients with getting an adequate or an approved accounting system by passing the SF 1408 survey. We do a lot of work with indirect rates and strategic pricing, and the way that we help the clients, at least on a kind of a daily, weekly basis, is helping them again get their accounting system set up and take advantage of some of the automated tools that are out there. At the end of our time together today, you should be able to list bookkeeping tasks that can be automated, identify software and apps that can process these automated transactions, and identify CPAs and consultants with government contract expertise. With that, Jenny, I'll let you kick off our first polling question here today, please.
And yes, Jenny is also part of the Left Brain Professionals team, and she is joining us as well. Jenny, I just want to make sure that we don't both launch the poll so that it doesn't open and close. So I can launch it if you'd like.
Yep.
Awesome. All right, so polling question number 1, how much of your bookkeeping is currently automated? So great place to start. Looks like those responses are coming in quickly. The leading response is we utilize a few automated resources. So as you are responding, please make sure you enter your response in the quick poll box. If you want to take a minute and let us know, you can just type into the GoToWebinar questions box what of those processes you're outsourcing or what resources you're using for the automation. Absolutely would love to hear from you with a little more detail. So we're going to close the poll down. Robert, we got 97% response. That's fantastic.
That's awesome.
That is amazing. Almost 100% of you entered in. So yes, over a third say utilize a few automated resources. Over a quarter use quite a bit for your bookkeeping. That's really cool. And then 14% say all. That's impressive. And for those of you who aren't using automation yet, you're going to learn a lot about it today and decide if it's right for you. So thanks for entering those responses.
All right, I do want to, before we get too deep into this, have a quick disclaimer, and that is that we're going to talk about some various software vendors and tools that are out there. If you decide to purchase any of those through us or through our website, we may receive a commission or a markup on the wholesale price. And also, everything that we're going to talk about today is really around QuickBooks, and both QuickBooks Online and Desktop. Many of the solutions that we will mention do integrate with some of the other software out there, such as Sage and FreshBooks and Xero and others. But again, in the government contracting space, at least most of the small businesses out there, they're using one version of QuickBooks. And so that's where our focus is today. All right. Let's talk about automated timekeeping. And the other thing that I'll say is that, some of what we're talking about today really applies across the board, whether you're a government contractor or not. And so, a lot of these tools, any company could take advantage of. Again, because with government contractors, there are some very specific requirements. I'm going to try to talk about those, some of those requirements and how the tools help you meet those specific requirements as a government contractor. Well, obviously in the world of automating anything, right, one of the things that we're trying to do is eliminating paper, right? We get away from, having paper printed out, chasing it down, having to file it, all of that. My company, Left Brain Professionals, I don't own a filing cabinet. I never have. Any paper that comes in, if I do actually get anything in the mail or something like that, I scan it in, and and we store everything online. So I don't have paper files anywhere. And I know many people have embraced that, but there are still some people out there that kind of struggle with that concept. But all of what we talk about today is that you can run your business, at least from the accounting side of stuff, from your laptop. You don't even need a printer most of the time anymore, right? So we talk about how to help you get away from those things. From a timekeeping perspective, we like to set it up so that the time entry is synchronized with your general ledger and with your payroll, and as much as we can to truly automate that synchronization. Now, again, some of the tools, and if you're not using QuickBooks, it's possible that you may have to actually, download a file, but you're still getting away from the manual keying of data. Right back in the day, when I started in accounting, right, everybody filled out a paper timesheet and you signed it, gave it to your supervisor and they signed it. And, then somebody somewhere had to manually key that stuff in, right? So, it's kind of odd. We still come across some new clients who come to work with us. And even if they're not necessarily using a paper timesheet, we find that they're sometimes still using an Excel file. And to me, that's really just the same, right? Because somebody still has to extract the data from the Excel file, get it into the accounting system for billing purposes, getting into the payroll system, right? And so we want to eliminate all of that for you. Now, one of the specific requirements for government contractors is an audit log to track changes. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the possible solutions. But in order to have, you know, a DCAA compliant timekeeping system, you do have to have that audit log. And so, and it's a very specific requirement as well. So, for example, the requirement says that, you know, if an employee enters time, let's say they entered their time yesterday for Monday and they come in today and they want to make a change, there has to be an audit log to show, you know, that they had, you know, maybe they put 4 hours and 4 hours on two different jobs yesterday. And when they came in this morning, maybe they realized they entered the wrong number of hours, or maybe they selected the wrong job and they go, oh, I need to fix that. You know, we want them to fix it, but we also want to see that there was an audit trail of this was the original entry and this is the new entry, and that there's a note as to why they made that change. Again, another specific requirement for government contractors is this total time accounting, or what we call uncompensated overtime. So that means that employees are recording all hours worked, and that's really the key issue for our salaried employees, right? It's usually not an issue for hourly employees because they're happy to get all of their time on the timesheet, you know, and especially if they're getting overtime. You know, but oftentimes our salaried employees are like, well, I'm getting paid my 40 hours. So, you know, whether I work 40 or 50 or something else, right? What does it really matter? I'm still getting paid for 40 hours. Well, the government cares, and they want to make sure that if you're working 50 hours, you're reporting 50 hours, because at the end of the day, that does affect the cost that goes to each of the jobs that somebody worked, right? So we have to recalculate that new effective rate. And if we want to know about that, we've done some webinars on that in the past, and we can point you to that information. These automated timekeeping tools also allow you to do things like aligning labor categories and service items to specific contracts or CLINs. And the next piece, I'm going to talk about both of these together, is that you can assign employees to those specific labor categories and service items or contracts and CLINs. So here specifically what I'm talking about, and this again, it's kind of a unique issue for government contractors, especially those that have time and materials contracts and cost type contracts where you have a predefined, excuse me, you have a predefined labor category that was in the RFP, and that labor category or those multiple labor categories are in your contract. And so an employee has to meet the very specific requirements of that labor category in order to be able to charge it. And furthermore, oftentimes labor categories may be restricted or expense types that we'll talk about in a little bit when we talk about expense reporting. Expense types may be restricted to specific CLINs or contract line item numbers, right? So I could have a contract that, let's say, has 10 CLINs on, right? It's got 10 line items. And depending on how those line items are broken out, I may have, you know, certain labor categories that can only charge certain CLINs, and these automated tools allow you to do that mapping. So it makes it a lot easier for the employee when they log in, less likely that they can make an error. One of the other things that's nice is by assigning employees to jobs and other stuff, we also can limit what they see when they log in. We make it easier for them, because let's say as a company, maybe you had 20 active jobs going on. Well, if you made that available to all employees, then when I log in to enter my time, right, and I do a drop down or whatever your system is, right, I've got this long list of stuff I need to scroll through and try to find my job. But let's say maybe I'm only working 4 jobs. If you just assign me to those 4 jobs, then when I log in, right, and I click the little drop down, now I have 4 items in my list instead of 20. So it's easier for me, and it's more likely that I'm going to be more accurate in my data entry of that time. These automated timekeeping systems also allow you to have automated reminders for daily completion of timesheets. Again, another requirement for government contractors, right, is that your employees need to enter their time worked every day, and you need to have an email generated that goes to them. It says, hey, you didn't complete your time for yesterday. And what we typically see is that most companies will configure that to be like 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. the next day. So we'll kind of give people, you know, the first hour of the day to, you know, to catch up their timesheet yesterday. But if they didn't get it, you know, if it's not entered by then, they get a reminder that says, hey, now is your time to do that. Again, one of those specific government contracting requirements. The automated tools also allow you to capture time from both employees and contractors. Really helpful when you have subcontractors, where you need to capture the hours that they work with details to roll into your invoice. And so typically what will happen then in that situation is that those subcontractor employees are actually entering 2 timesheets, and people will grumble about it, but it's a really good practice, and a couple of things can happen here. So again, kind of unfortunately, those employees do have to enter their timesheet into their employer's timekeeping, right, so that they can get paid. But then they enter their time worked on that project into that into whoever the prime is, so that they capture the time. So for prime, then what it lets you do is, one, it gets the timekeeping in your system to speed up and aid you in generating your invoice to your clients, because now that data is in the system. And then the other thing that it does is it also gives you a way to have a check and balance for the subcontractor's invoice. And we use this practice internally ourselves. So we have a subcontractor that we use occasionally for some very specific tasks. And this is what he does. He logs in, he enters his time into our system. He sends an invoice with the details at the end of the month. And then Sue, our bookkeeper, compares those two. When she gets his invoice, she goes into the timekeeping, pulls his timesheet, and matches the two. And in fact, she keeps them together and attaches them in QuickBooks. So we use QuickBooks Online. So she attaches them in there. So if at any point somebody wants to validate that, I can open it up and I can see his invoice, I can see his timesheet and see that they match. So it's a great way to validate those things as well. And again, specifically the audit trail that we've already talked about. So now let's talk about some specific software and app solutions that are out there. So one is QuickBooks Time. It used to be called T-Sheets. Intuit bought up T-Sheets a few years ago. And in the beginning of 2021, they rolled out a change and just rebranded it to QuickBooks Time. It's the same tool. In fact, the domain still says T-Sheets in it, but it is now QuickBooks Time. There's another great application called Our Timesheet, H-O-U-R, Our Timesheet. It's designed, that one is specifically designed for government contractors and to help you achieve DCAA compliance. Really great tool, again, integrates directly with both QuickBooks Online and desktop. And I will say the QuickBooks Time can be DCAA compliant. There are some other settings and things that need to be changed in there, but you are able to do that. Many of you may use Harvest, and you might say, well, why did I point it out in here if it's not DCAA compliant? Again, it's a common tool that we've come across people using. It's a nice tool. I've used it myself in the past. It's just that unfortunately, and even Harvest recognizes this themselves, and the information is available on their website, that it is not DCAA compliant. Now, I don't know if they're planning to change that, but that's where it is right now. And then the other thing that I would tell you is that QuickBooks themselves, now again, this is not QuickBooks Time, so I don't want to confuse you, but particularly within QuickBooks and like within QuickBooks Online, you can actually create a timekeeping user, and so that they can log in and enter their time. You get some of the same functionality. Obviously, they can choose their job and enter their hours and stuff like that. The problem is that you don't get all of the audit trails and all of the other features and functionality that you would get from QuickBooks Time or from one of these other solutions. So it is there, but you're not going to be DCAA compliant by just using the default built-in. The other that I would tell you is that most of your, before we launch this polling question, most of your payroll providers out there are providing timekeeping solutions within the payroll solution. The problem is that they are not, excuse me, those timekeeping solutions through the payroll providers, we haven't come across any yet that are DCAA compliant. And a couple of the key things that are missing, again, with most of the ones that we've looked at, they don't have a sufficient audit trail, meaning that they cannot and they don't have the ability to enforce tracking of changes and forcing people to enter a reason for making a change. So that's one of the issues. The other is that we've discovered that most of them don't have the ability to properly handle the total time accounting and the job costing that's related to that. So I just, again, a word of caution that if you think, hey, we're using Paylocity or ADP or somebody else. Some great tools out there, but the timekeeping will not pass muster in order for a DCA audit. So with that, Liz, if we can do our polling question, please.
Yes, so the second poll question up on your screen, the question is, in automated timekeeping, which of the following, what do you synchronize with? Do you synchronize with the GL, payroll, both the GL and payroll, or none of the above? And we have a question from Nancy. Nancy is wondering, are daily timesheet reminders only required for those employees who do not fill out their timesheet the day before, or does the email have to go to everyone? So that's a great question. Thanks, Nancy.
No, yeah, it's only if they haven't completed their timesheet. And usually again, if you're working with one of the timekeeping systems that's designed for government contractors, that is the setting. It'll say, and if they haven't completed the timesheet, to send the reminder. And again, most of them will give you like, do you want to send it by 5 p.m. the day of? Do you want to send it like 9 a.m. the next morning? So usually you have some settings in there that you can adjust for that.
Very good. We're going to go ahead and close the polling question down. And majority of you, overwhelming majority, 68%, say that with automated timekeeping, you're synchronizing with both the GL and payroll. So thanks for letting us know.
Yep, and that is the correct answer. So Charlie for both A and B. All right, continuing on here with our content. Now let's take the same stuff that we just talked about for timekeeping and apply it to expense reporting. Now, some of this is going to sound duplicative because they're, timekeeping and expense reporting are very similar. So again, the goal here is that we're helping you eliminate paper. I mean, how many of you, we've all probably lived this, right, of the old-fashioned, even if you have typed it into Excel, you had to print it out. And I remember I worked for this company a long time ago. You had to take your receipts and you had to tape them to an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, and it couldn't go off the edge. And at one point they said you could only tape one receipt per piece of paper. They had these crazy rules, right? So we get rid of all that. We don't have to do that. We can stop chasing receipts in general because now we have all of these apps out there, right? So I can take a picture with my phone, and in fact, many of you probably are already doing this. We use a tool called Tally, which I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. They got a mobile app. So it gives me a couple of options. I can email a receipt. So right, a lot of times we buy stuff online and we get the emailed receipt in. And in fact, when we went to dinner the other night, like a lot of these restaurants now, once you've connected your email address to that card, every time you use that card, right, it automatically emails you. That's really nice. So I don't have to worry about that. So I just get the email receipt in. I just forward the email to a specific email address, and now it's associated with my expense report. I can snap a picture again with my phone and upload it that way through the app. I can also just log into the web browser and and I can upload a document. Maybe I had to scan in a document or something like that. So I have different ways in order to get those receipts in there. These automated tools from the employer's perspective, excuse me, we can now force employees to report and code all transactions. So one of the things that Tally and some of the other tools out there allow you to do is to set up your credit card feed, and it forces when those credit card transactions come through right on that daily automated feed, then you assign, once you do the setup up front, for us, we've got 4 employees who have credit cards. They are users in the Tally system, for example. And so I say this card belongs to this user and this card belongs to this user, and I set that up. Then when those daily transactions come in, it automatically goes, to their little login. And so when they're logged in, they can see here's the transactions that are on the credit card, and you need to report them. It won't let them delete it. They are forced to do something with that item, right? And so that's a great way to capture all of that. By doing that, you're improving your credit card reconciliation process. All of these are going to synchronize back to QuickBooks, so that when you get the credit card statement at the end of the month and you're in QuickBooks and you go through that reconcile function, the reconciliation should be, and usually is, a whole lot easier, because that same feed, right, went into the expense reporting. The employees, attached the receipts, they coded it, they submitted it, it was synchronized to QuickBooks. Now everything should be here, and ideally that credit card reconciliation process, even with multiple credit cards, should be a matter of minutes, not hours like it used to be. I mean, I remember spending hours and hours in the past, right, trying to do this kind of stuff. Similar to timekeeping that we talked about before, I can assign employees to specific contracts or CLINs. Again, if I've got 20 active contracts and I've got an employee who's working 4 of those contracts, right, I don't want them to accidentally charge somewhere else where they shouldn't. Or maybe I've got some internal projects. For example, maybe you've got some G&A projects where, or G&A even expense types where only an executive or only a manager or somebody should be charging those items. You know, a regular employee should not be able to charge. This is another way that you can go in through this setup and limit that kind of configuration. It allows you to automate the policy enforcement. So you can go in and say, so for example, one of our policies is I tell employees they have to have a receipt. So even though the IRS, I think, gives you a $75, you know, de minimis, you know, we don't ask questions if there's no receipt under $75. I say, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want employees say, well, it was $74.99 or it was $75.10 or I lost the receipt or what. We just say one simple rule: every transaction must have a receipt. Now, invariably it happens, right? Somebody pays for parking and they don't get a, you know, they don't get a receipt. They paid $4 or whatever. I don't get hung up on that. But the general rule is we just say everybody has to have a receipt. You can set up all kinds of policy rules in here, whatever that is that you want it to be. It can be certain types of transactions that are limited to certain dollar amounts. As I said earlier, you can limit certain transactions to certain employees, right? They can, you know, certain employees can only see certain expense types. You can say that if it's a certain dollar amount, you know, if something's over a certain dollar amount, they have to have additional justification or an additional approval or something like that. Already mentioned requiring receipts. The next piece is really nice because again, this is talking from the QuickBooks perspective, where we have customer project. If you're using classes in QuickBooks, you can force employees that when they enter their expense report, that they have to choose a customer, they have to choose a project, and they have to choose a class. Again, it makes it a whole lot easier for you from a bookkeeping perspective, from invoicing stuff out. You know, otherwise you're getting a bunch of, and I've seen this before again, and we still see this with some clients, they're manually chasing down people to get a receipt. And if they get a receipt, right, so then at the end of the month, the bookkeeper gets the statement, they're sitting there looking at it, they don't even have a receipt, they don't know where to code it, you know. Yeah, I can see that it was a meal, but I don't know, was it a meal for this job or for that job? Was it a meal for, you know, whatever it was, right? So by requiring all of this information at the data entry point, then you're making it a lot easier on the back end. And again, you see here, we're automating this bookkeeping process. It also allows you to reimburse employees faster, and I'll talk a little more about that in a moment. But the nice thing is by getting these in, and you can set up different rules, employees can submit them any day of the week, every day of the week, a certain day of the week, a certain day of the month, whatever you want. But the nice thing is that with some of the tools, and particularly if you're using some of the automated AP tools that we'll talk about later in today's presentation, you can honestly reimburse employees within a couple of days. And not necessarily have to wait, you know, 2 or 3 weeks for whatever your regular accounts payable process is. And again, similar to timekeeping, these tools can be used to capture expenses from both employees and from contractors if that's something that you want to do. So what are some of the software and apps that are out there? Many of you are probably familiar with Concur. Great tool, but I will tell you it's on the more expensive end. And you do pay Concur's pricing model, at least for the small business world, and I'm not sure what it is elsewhere, but they do charge a per expense report processing fee, right? So that's just something to keep in mind, that if you're looking at tools out there, are you paying per month, per user, per, you know, per expense report? There are a few different pricing models, so just make sure that you know what those prices are when you are looking at some of the options. Harvest. And notice that here I didn't say anything negative about Harvest, because when it comes to expense reporting, I mean, we do have the proper coding of expenses is important from a government contracting perspective, but the actual process itself doesn't have the same requirements that timekeeping has, right? So Harvest here can be an acceptable tool. We use Tally. It's a tool that we like. Again, most all of these tools work very similarly. Zoho Expense is another one that's out there. And again, similar to the timekeeping, you can use the QuickBooks app on your phone or the email and forward stuff. Again, unfortunately, part of what you lose here is that you don't actually have the expense report and routing and approval and some of the other stuff in there. You don't get the ability to set up rules and do requirements and things like that. So really the QuickBooks again, the core QuickBooks functionality is that, yeah, I can create a user, I can, show them how to download the app, and I can tell them to take a picture, but I can't enforce anything through that particular thing. Liz, another polling question for us, please.
All right, we'll get the third polling question launched. Reimbursing employees faster is a benefit of automated expense reporting. Oh, and we have a question here from Miriam. What about Expensify? And I also will give a shout out to Divvy as well as an option to, rather than reimburse expenses, just give employees cards that are budget controlled. So maybe you could comment on that, Robert, about the reimbursement as compared to using different platforms for expense management.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'll try to remember. I forgot to throw in the payroll side of this too, so if I forget to mention payroll, remind me of that. So, and this is where I have to kind of be like brutally honest. I don't lie well. I'm not a fan of Expensify. In some ways, I will say that I think they have a great tool. We used to use it. The automated reimbursement functionality they have in there is really nice and slick. The main problem that I have with Expensify, and this is something that you're seeing, I think Divvy begins to fall into this, and again, some of the other platforms are falling into this. So some of the platforms, they are forcing you to use their credit cards. In fact, some of the platforms, and I forget which one at the moment, I know there's at least one out there, you can only use their credit card. You cannot, so if you've got a Bank of America card, a Chase card, United Airlines, whatever, you can't, again, I know at least one of those platforms out there, you cannot use those other credit cards. You can only use theirs. Some of the other platforms say, yes, you can use the other credit cards, that's fine. And this is what's happening with Expensify, but we're going to charge you more. So if you use our credit card, we'll charge you less, but if you use your credit card, we'll charge you more. And the reason I struggle with that is really because, and it certainly applies to me as a business owner. I know it applies to many other business owners out there. We already have credit cards. We already have banking relationships. We may have a particular credit card because of the loyalty program, right? For example, that's there. For example, like we have a United credit card because that's who we do a lot of flying with. And so it's like, I want to get my points there and do that, right? I don't want to be forced to use somebody else's thing out there. So that's again, I think the tool itself generally works well, but be aware of that. Also, again, specifically for Expensify, if you're not using theirs, the price is as much as $36 per user per month, whereas a number of the other tools that are out there are somewhere around $9 to $10 per user per month. So it's a significant difference in price here that we're talking about. And then I said I wanted to mention payroll, so let me do that while I'm thinking about it. Something that you will see similar to timekeeping is that most of your payroll providers are now offering some kind of expense reporting tool. And what they like to do is to reimburse employees through payroll. We are not fans, and I do not promote reimbursing employees for expense reports through payroll. And there are two reasons why. The first is around the reporting side of it. So unfortunately, what we see, and the issue is kind of conflated with a similar issue, is that the payroll summary reports are oftentimes very confusing. And so when people go to do journal entries, right? So you've processed payroll, the money came out of your account, you get a report, and you say, okay, now I'm going to go into QuickBooks or, whatever your system is, and I'm going to enter the journal entry so that I get the money out of my bank and I get, all the expenses where they need to go. Well, the problem is some of those reports are confusing at best. And one of the problems that we see oftentimes, especially again, because we only deal with government contractors, but it seems to really be a problem, is that there's a confusion over the employees portion of the taxes and how that's reported and how that is recorded in the system. So remember that the employees portion of tax really is a labor expense, right? We paid labor and that came out of their portion. Well, if you don't do the journal entries correctly to account for that, then it affects the dollars for labor, ultimately affects all of your indirect rates, it affects fringe. I mean, it causes problems. So again, if those are wrong, big problems. And similarly, so this is where the payroll reimbursement expenses comes in. We see that people get that dollar amount that's on that report for a payroll expense. It'll often, for like a travel reimbursement or something, they'll end up coding it to labor or somewhere else. And again, it just causes a lot of problems for us. So that's the primary reason that we tell people. The other is that if you're paying people every 2 weeks, right? Most of us get paid, bi-weekly. The problem here is that usually you have to have payroll processed by Wednesday, right, in order to get on the Friday payroll. And so, even with that, if somebody's expense report maybe is not entered until Monday or Tuesday and approved, it may not get processed in time to be on that week's payroll. So now they're waiting an additional 2 weeks to get reimbursed. Right, and so because there are other ways to speed up, it's just another reason we're not a fan of that. Bit of a long-winded answer, but I hope that that's helpful.
I think that's a really helpful dialogue just to know how it's working like tangibly for you and for your company and have that example. So thank you.
All right, so carrying on with our content here, let's talk about the travel booking portion of it. So when I mentioned Concur, and I know there's some other apps out there too, one of the nice things that Concur can do, I'm not sure that it's in every package, is that you can get a travel booking service. And then one of the other nice things is that you can integrate that again with some of these platforms out there so that when an employee does travel, the itinerary is automatically transferred over to the expense reporting so that all of that information is there and helps for further reconciliation of stuff. By using travel service, whether you're using maybe a local travel agent that helps you with it, if you're using one of the online travel companies that are out there, again, for government contractors, what's nice is that you can set up these policies or rules to help ensure compliance with the federal travel regulations or the joint travel regulations. And I will pause there. Much deeper conversation. Some contractors say, well, but we're not, federal employees. Why do we have to follow the rules? Well, the short answer is that, the auditors are going to look for that, and they do expect you to use that as guidelines in your stuff. So you need to have that built into your travel policy, your written policies and procedures, but obviously working with your travel agent or whatever travel application that you're using to, as much as you can, build in and automate those policies as well. I already mentioned, integrating with expense reporting. Some of these tools have direct integrations with the GSA per diem data, so they're automatically pulling that in. What's nice is because, again, then when I go in to create an expense report, I can say, I traveled here on these dates, and it automatically goes and pulls the GSA per diem and says, okay, here's the max. Here's the meal reimbursement, right? Here's the max hotel. It automatically pulls in that kind of stuff. Not all of the tools do that, but some of them do. The other thing that I would tell you is that some of the tools handle that manually, and some meaning that you have to either like go in and upload a file, and if you're not familiar, you can go to GSA's website to the per diem. If you're not familiar, over on the right-hand side, there's a little button and it says download the Excel file, so you can do that. But it's not necessarily in the format, right, that it needs to be. So you may have to go in and do some work with that. I will tell you, since somebody brought up Expensify, unless Expensify changed theirs is a manual process, and it was quite an ordeal in order to get the GSA per diem stuff to load in there. And even when it was in there, it didn't really operate the way, at least for government contractors, the way that we're used to seeing it. Again, the other thing to keep in mind with Expensify and most of the other tools out here is right that they're designed for, you know, commercial companies. The average company out there, they're not used to dealing with some of the government contract specific requirements. Again, the other thing about automating some of the travel booking, and this was a new thing to me somewhat recently, is that you can set up corporate travel loyalty rewards programs. So for example, you can go set up, and I think you can do it for Southwest, American, United, and Delta. And then what you do is you go in and associate your employees with those accounts, right? So they have to have, for example, you know, a Delta account or a United account or whatever, and you associate just their code with your account. And then what happens when they travel and they book it through your stuff, right, so whichever tool that you're using, they earn their rewards points, right, because, you know, the traveler themselves are always going to earn those points. But then you as a company also earn points on top of that. And the points are very similar in that, you know, you can use them for travel, so you could get vouchers and, you know, maybe give them away, you know, as a gift or a bonus or a raffle. I think you can cash them in as well and get, you know, other gifts and types of things. So it could be something that could be used, you know, for the, you know, a picnic in the summer or whatever, right? If you're having a company picnic and you're looking for giveaways, might be a way to do that. The automated tools also allow you to set up corporate cards on file so that employees either don't have to use personal cards, or something that we've seen oftentimes is that companies will say, hey, we get a really good deal on airfare on this particular card, so they want all the airfare expenses to go on that card, and we get a really good deal on hotels on this card, so we want all of the hotel expenses to go on this card. And so what you can do is go in and load that information, you know, in the company profile, and you say, look, all airfare goes here, all hotel goes here. Then when the employees go in and book, it's automatically going in there. Again, the other nice thing here is that because it's going on a corporate card and this is connected, then somebody, you know, in the accounting department or travel department or whatever can log in and get all of that and much more easily reconcile those transactions. Also, overall allows, you know, easier administration of travel for multiple travelers. So the one that we have a relationship with that we promote is Amtrav. I know there's a bunch of others out there. I do want to give a little shout out to Amtrav for a couple of reasons. One is that they have a really nice pricing model. One of the things you need to know when you do look at all of the travel agents out there, again, whether it's somebody local, you know, maybe down the street, or if you're using an online tool, obviously there are fees involved, right? This is not a free service. The fees, typically we see somewhere between $30 and $50 per transaction. Sometimes it's cheaper to do it online, and if you have to pick up the phone and call somebody, so for example, it might be $20 or $30 if you do it online. But if you have to pick up the phone and talk to somebody on the phone, they charge you $50, maybe $60 to do that. So keep that in mind as you look at it. The other thing is you want to know, are they charging you per transaction or per trip? So perfect example here, let's say you have an employee and they call in and say, hey, I'd like to go ahead and book my airfare, travel, and rental car all at once. And the agent says, great, you know, that's $30. They book all three of them, you pay one $30 transaction. What happens if you have an employee who books airfare and maybe forgets or doesn't think about that they need a car? Maybe they think, well, I'll deal with the car thing later. So they call in, they book the airfare, that's $30. They call later, they book the car for the same trip, but the travel agent says, yeah, but you didn't book that at the time you booked the other stuff, so it's another $30. Now, some agents will say, yeah, you can come back and add to it, and as long as you're adding to the same trip, there's no additional fee. So again, it's not consistent across providers, so make sure that you know what you're getting. The nice thing about Amtrav is that one, their fees are as cheap as $15, so they're the cheaper of the ones that we found out there. They also offer an unlimited. So if you have some travelers, and I forget the exact price, but they have a couple of options. You can pay 0 monthly fees and you just pay $15 per trip. Or if you have travelers who travel a lot, one of the nice things is that they do have an unlimited, and so you pay one flat fee per month for that. So it's a great tool. All right, let's now dive in and start talking about automating accounts payable. Again, I didn't reiterate some of the stuff from before, but we're still trying to eliminate paper. We want to pay our vendors faster and easier. How many of you spend? Again, I've lived this in my past, right? I mean, I got started as a low-level accountant and worked my way up, and I processed many, accounts payable. You had to enter it. We had to stamp it. There was some things like we had to make a copy of, and you put one copy here and one copy there, and then you always had to make sure, right, you had the remittance, and we had to have the remittance attached to the check, but then you had to rip off the other piece of the check and put with the copy you were filing. Right? It was just a lot of work, right? So there's a lot of time that goes into that. There's a lot of money that goes into printing checks, right? You got to have special printer paper. How many of you ever printed off like 50 checks and discovered that 4 of them jammed? And then when you went to reprint them, it reprinted the wrong check on the wrong check number, right? And stuff like that. We've all lived those kinds of things. Buying envelopes, buying stamps. I think stamps are 57 or 59 cents. Doesn't sound like a lot of money, but studies have shown that the average processing per account per payment, I've seen somewhere between $2 and $5. I mean, I think on average, I'm seeing regular, processing fees of upwards of $5. Again, when you consider the labor, the effort, copy, if they got to make, it's got to be filed somewhere. Again, you're buying all these checks and stuff. So we're trying to reduce those costs. We can also synchronize by using these automated tools. We can synchronize the payments with our general ledger, right? We don't have to go in and do anything else. Once we generate the payment's electronic, it's automatically recorded in the ledger, and everything is finalized. And there are options out there, I'm going to go over some of these in a moment, where you can send ACH payments for as little as $0. Yes, for free. I will talk about that. So what are some of your options? The first one I want to talk about is related to this, but it's a little different in that it doesn't actually do the payable portion. So this is HubDoc. Receipt Bank is very similar to it. HubDoc is nice because it's a document management tool that allows you to aggregate all of your accounts payable stuff. So a couple of ways that it can be used. It has an app so you can snap pictures. Excuse me, you get an email address. So what we do is we have a situation where an external email address, and our vendors then email their invoices to that address. And when they do that, then it's automatically in the system, right? So they don't have to, it doesn't go to some strange email box. It's pulled in, it's automatically scanned in, and it's available. The other one of the really nice things about it is that it will log into some of your online accounts to automatically download stuff. So perfect example is, let's say you've got a UPS account or Verizon or AT&T or Spectrum or something like that. And many of us, we pay those by credit card, right? It's automatic. You go in, you set it up, it's on the credit card, it automatically gets paid every month, but they don't actually send you the statement or the invoice, right? You got to log in order to get it. Well, that's kind of a pain, especially, I mean, it was a pain for me when I was doing my own books for the business. It's a pain for my bookkeeper. I got to go log in here, and I got to go log in here, and I got to go log in somewhere else, right? Well, HubDoc eliminates all of that. They support many of their big vendors out there. You go into your credentials, and essentially every day it goes and pings and says, hey, do you have a new document? Got new information for me? It'll pull down your bank statements. It'll pull down all kinds of stuff. And then what's nice is your bookkeeper has one place to log in. They log into HubDoc, and everything is right there. Now, if you're using QuickBooks Online, There's an extra feature in there that's really nice because it will synchronize directly with QuickBooks Online. You can go in and code those items and it will generate the bill to be paid out of QuickBooks Online. It also connects to bill.com, which we'll talk about in a moment. A couple of the payment tools that are available to you. One is Veeam. That's one of the ones that allows you to be zero, again, as simple as free potentially, for a payment. And you say, well, how is it free? Nothing in life is free, right? Well, that's true. The way that they make their money is a couple of things. They really specialize in international payments. And so if you have any international payments to send or receive, there is a fee for that. Your domestic payments are free. The other way that they make money is if you send an invoice to a customer to be paid, and that customer, gets the link and they log in and they say, hey, I'd like to use my credit card. If your customer wants to pay you by credit card, you no longer have to pay those fees and you don't have to be involved. Veeam adds the processing fee on top, right, of your invoice amount. So you get your full invoice amount. Your customer pays, that 2.9 or 3%, whatever it is, they pay that little extra on top. Veeam makes that money, and that's part of the way that they keep the domestic payments for free. Bill.com and Veeam are very similar. There are some differences. One of the things is there's some additional functionality in Bill.com, but they both do accounts payable and accounts receivable. Bill.com is a monthly fee, and there is a per transaction fee. But again, the fee structure and the services that they offer are similar, but there are some differences out there. Another one that I'm not familiar with is, I know it, but we don't have anybody using it, is called Melio. And Routable, again, is another option out there. QuickBooks, like many of the other tools, they do have their own payments. My caution to you here is if you're not aware, QuickBooks payments changed their fee structure recently, which was the reason that we migrated away from them. And again, we're seeing this similar fee structure with some of the other tools out there for both accounts receivable and accounts payable. So just be careful when you're looking at some of the tools. Some of them are charging you a per month fee. Some of them charge you a per transaction fee. Some of them it's a per month and a per transaction fee. Some of them, the per transaction fee is a percentage of the transaction. And we're seeing anywhere from 0.5 to 1% of the transaction, sometimes with a maximum and sometimes without. Perfect example, QuickBooks payments. ACH fees used to be 50 cents, if you paid somebody via ACH, I'm sorry, I think outgoing was like 69 cents or something, and incoming was 50 cents or so, relatively inexpensive, right, at the end of the month. Well, all of a sudden they changed that to 1% with a $10 maximum. And, so you can see where if you were going from, and many of our invoices are in the thousands of dollars, so we were maxing out that $10. So you can see that every time we were receiving a payment, instead of paying 50 cents to receive that payment, all of a sudden we were paying $10 to receive that payment. So again, just be very careful that you look at some of the options that are out there. I'm gonna jump over here and talk about accounts receivable. We'll get through this, and I know we'll have a polling question here soon. But the accounts receivable and accounts payable, we all know are very similar, processes. And the tools that we'll talk about here are very similar. So the nice thing about the accounts receivable is you can send your invoices via email. And again, the Veeam, and we'll talk about these when I get to that slide, but the Veeam, the bill.com, directly from QuickBooks, it's all nice. Very similar. Your customer gets an email with a link in it. They click that link, it opens up, they can see the invoice, they can then go in and choose how they want to pay you, right? They can pay you via ACH by entering their bank information, or they can pay you via credit card. You receive your payments online, faster and more secure. Last summer, the United States Postal Service, the good old USPS, lost 3 of our client payments in a 2-month period. The total cash, now we eventually got paid and got it all sorted out, but but the delay in cash for us was about $50,000 among those 3 payments. Again, in not even quite 2 months. And so obviously that's very frustrating, right? That affects our cash flow. You know, because I'm like, okay, what's going on? And I'm calling the client's saying, well, you know, we mailed the payment, and I can say, and it was 3 payments, 2 different clients. I know the clients, I know that they sent them, but then it was also a frustration on their part, right? Because then they had to go in and put a stop check on those payments, right? Because they had mailed it. Then they had to issue a new check and get them to us. Well, you know, when people are mailing checks, not only obviously is there a cost on their side, but there's a time cost on our side, right? We've got to wait for it to get here. Then when it gets here, you know, somebody's got to go deposit it in the bank. So all of that is delaying me getting my money. If my, you know, if my clients will go in, and I will say we've probably got 70 to 80% of our clients who do pay online, which is really nice. Then the money's in my bank faster. And then one of the other nice things is that it also synchronizes directly to my general ledger. So it records that payment automatically for me. Again, with Veeam, the fee can be as little as $0 for domestic. They can send automated reminders, which is nice, right? So you can go in and adjust that and say, you know, send a reminder 3 days, 7 days, whatever that is. So you can set those up. You can track that invoice status and the payments online. The software and apps that are available, again, Veeam, Bill.com do both accounts payable and accounts receivable. Same for Melio, Routable, and the QuickBooks payment. And with that, Liz, if we can do a polling question, please.
All right, that sounds good. You've done a ton of research on all of these apps and integrations, Robert. This is really helpful. Here's our 4th polling question. What is automated in order to send customer invoices via email? Would that be timekeeping, expense reporting, accounts payable, or accounts receivable? While we are on this polling question, we have another question from Miriam wondering, what do you think of Relay?
Relay, I'm not familiar with Relay, so I'm going to have to add that to my research list.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks. There's so many new applications and platforms and solutions coming out all the time, and it's always neat to learn about new ones. You've covered a lot of the bases, and some of them, Robert, I haven't heard of yet. I haven't heard of Veeam. That's a new one to me.
Yeah,
Looks
and
like
again, I think my general answer to Miriam and to anybody with all of these is, you know, just make sure in your own research that you know what the fees are, right? That's where we're seeing that people are getting tripped up, whether it's Expensify or QuickBooks or anybody else. It's like, you know, do I have to use your card? Is it a per transaction fee? Is there a monthly fee? Is there a monthly minimum? Those are going to be the kinds of things that are going to set, you know, one vendor apart from another.
absolutely. We closed the poll question down. 60% of our audience said accounts receivable. I believe that's the correct answer.
Yep, right. If we're sending customer invoices, right, think about that. That would be accounts receivable. So D, David, would be the correct answer here. All right, let's continue on. And now we're going to talk about payroll and HR. Again, you know, our goal is to eliminate paper. We can automate onboarding. How many of you have participated, you know, in an opportunity where you were hired and instead of, you know, again, back in the day, we all, like, you had to show up, you had to have your driver's license, your passport, and your social security card, and they handed you a stack of paper, right? And your first day on the job, you spent 3 hours sitting in HR, right? And all you did was just fill out paper. Now all of that's automated, which is, you know, people can do it from home, where they most likely have, you know, the documents and the information that they need to fill that out. You know, and especially in the world of distributed workforces, right? Even prior to COVID, we had more remote workforces, but especially since COVID, you know, we've got even more people who are working remotely. So the ability to automate that is really nice. The tool that we use, I love. I go in and enter a few basic details, including the employee name, email address, and a couple of other things. It sends them a link. They get the link, they log in, they enter, you know, all their address, their historical information, their jobs. They, you know, and if you've got insurance stuff, they can enter all of that. They can complete the information for their, you know, federal W-4 and your state W-4. They enter in the information for the I-9. They can upload a picture of their passport or their driver's license, all those kinds of things. And then it's all built in. And the other nice thing is that, you're also helping to ensure your compliance, because these tools are designed to help you be compliant, right? To make sure that you don't miss filling out something. Most of these tools allow you to track open positions and interview status, right? So if you're a larger organization and you've got multiple hiring managers, right? You may have one person or a couple of people in HR, but maybe you've got 5 hiring managers, they're all interviewing different people at different times for all these open positions. It's all done online and you can track all of that information. We can integrate and roll this stuff over directly into payroll and into into timekeeping, right? So if we've got the position out there and then we hire them, all that information can automatically flow through to some of these other systems. We can integrate payroll with general ledger, and I'll talk about a couple of examples of how this timekeeping and general ledger stuff flows. Some of your, again, there's so many payroll providers out there. Again, there's new apps popping up that I'm sure I don't even know of. We've got the one that we like and that we promote is Paylocity. They've been the easiest, and at least for us to work with. They've got a really great price. I will say that from a pricing perspective, what sets them apart is not so much that they're not necessarily that much cheaper than some of the others that are out there, but their pricing model is different. And it's different in that they charge you per employee per month, regardless of the number of payrolls that you process. If you look at most of your other payroll providers out there, they charge you per payroll. So for example, Paylocity is the program that we sell as a $200 base per month plus $8 per employee. And you might say, well, I'm only paying $4 or $4.25 or $4.50 or whatever for somebody else. Okay, but are you paying $4.50 per month or per payroll, right? And if you're a bi-weekly, then that means you're doing $4.50 times 26, where I'm doing 8 times 12, right? So there is a difference in price there, and again, make sure that you understand those nuances. Again, overall, we've been very pleased with Paylocity and how their platform works. Gusto is one of the apps that's been around for a few years and has gained a lot of popularity. Intuit has a couple of platforms that are available, as well as we know ADP, Paychex, and some others that are out there. I did want to talk, I said that I would talk about this timekeeping payroll general ledger integration really quickly, because that always seems to be a question that comes up, is people say, well, if we if we've got a timekeeping tool, do we synchronize that with payroll and then flow that back to the general ledger, or how does all of this work? And there's really no right or wrong answer necessarily. It's really a matter of what process makes sense for your business. I will say that, again, for government contractors, especially service providers, right, who need to invoice that time, that the best flow is that we get the timekeeping into the general ledger, because I need it in there so that I can generate my client invoices and send those out. You can then either take that timekeeping data and simultaneously sync that to payroll, right? So I could kind of have a tree that says timekeeping is up here, and I send the data to general ledger, and I send the data to payroll, and then you later bring together, the payroll and the general ledger data, right? Because there's going to be payroll, taxes, and other stuff that have to be reconciled over through journal entry. We've also seen where people say, well, I take the time from timekeeping to general ledger to payroll, and then back to general ledger. So a couple of options available to you. Pick the one that makes the most sense. With that, a polling question, please.
All right, let's go ahead with that polling question. We'll get that live. All right, and the polling question is up on your screen. This is the 5th polling question, and the question is, automating payroll and HR helps with which of the following? Those first responses came in quickly. We'll leave it open for about 3 more seconds here. And I think we're all doing pretty well. 99% of the audience says all of the above. Yes, eliminate paper, automate onboarding, and track open positions. Those all sound like excellent attributes to me.
Yes, that is the correct answer, all of the above. All right, back to our content. So now let's talk a little bit about automating GovCon reporting, and hope you guys got some more questions. We'll have some time at the end to take some more questions. Going through our GovCon reporting, again, this is, again, one of the things that's obviously very specific for government contractors and this whole bookkeeping and accounting, how do we automate this? Government contractors need to be able to calculate and report their indirect rates. So we need to be able to calculate what the indirect rates are right now, right? What are my actual rates? Be able to compare that to budgets, right? So that I can see what happened and how that also flows through to my jobs, right? So one of the things that QuickBooks is unable to do, as well as most other accounting packages out there, unless it has been one that has been designed for government contractors, is that we can calculate, what they call job costing is capturing all the direct costs, right? So QuickBooks is really good at that. We can set up, a COGS or a direct section of our general ledger. We can make sure that accounts are coded there. We're ready to, we can run those reports, but that's not really the total cost of the job, right? We need to be able to calculate our fringe, overhead, and G&A and apply those costs to that job so that I can see these are my total costs, right, in order to execute that job. We also need to be able to do labor distribution, and just as a quick reminder, these three topics here on the screen right now, indirect rates, job costing, and labor distribution. We did deep dive webinars on each of these where we spent, I think, at least 90 minutes on each topic. So if you need, more information, contact us, contact Liz, and we can point you to that kind of stuff. Labor distribution, again, quick reminder for those of you, is that that's converting the hours, right, from timekeeping into dollars, and then distributing those dollars through the GL in terms of direct labor, overhead labor, and G&A labor, and as well distributing those dollars across the job. So this is an area that I've always said, we struggle with a lot of small companies, especially those that are new to government contracting, is that they'll have really good timekeeping tools and policies, and they can run me all kinds of reports and show me very detailed hours by project. But when it comes to, when it comes to looking at the general ledger, we see that they have like one, payroll expense or one salary expense account, right? And so that's what labor distribution does, is convert those hours into dollars and then further distribute them. The incurred cost proposal, again, is a very specific requirement for government contractors. Having the information in the system that we can easily extract that data is really helpful. We've got some clients that, their systems just really aren't friendly and the reporting isn't friendly. And so when it comes to preparing the incurred cost proposal, it takes us several hours to extract the data and get it in the format that we need. Whereas there are tools that are out there that are, again, designed for government contractors, it speeds up our ability in order to be able to do this. One of the primary tools, and let me back up just for a moment, when we talk about there's a great tool out there called ICAT, I-C-A-T, and it's icatsystems.com. It stands for Indirect Cost Allocation Tool. If you're a government contractor and you're using QuickBooks Desktop and you don't know about ICAT, please, please, please send me an email. I'm happy to do like a quick 10, 15-minute demo. You'll see how easy it is to use, relatively inexpensive, and it's going to do all of these things for you. So it's got built-in reports for your indirect rates, your job costing, your labor distribution, and your incurred cost proposal. So now I want to talk a little bit about, again, know what you're buying. I've really talked about that from the perspective of the price, but let's talk about when you're looking at firms and other vendors in general, and if you're looking to outsource some of your accounting, what should you be looking for? So one of the things to know is where is the software and the data? Is this software based at the firm and they own all of that, and me as a client, maybe I don't even have access to it? We see that out there, and I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad model. It's just not a model that I like, and it's not a model that we promote. I'm not saying that those firms who do that are bad. It's just not the model that we like. We like the client-based approach because we believe the client should have 24/7 access to their data. They should be able to get in, run reports, and see stuff. And and furthermore, why you don't like it, right? Things happen. Client becomes unhappy. They want to do something. They should be able to easily move their data, go somewhere else, do whatever they want to do. It really is their data. So if you're looking at outsourcing to a firm, make sure you understand, where is the software, who has access to it, how do I get access to my data and to my reports? Who or what is performing the task, right? How much, I can tell you that for the models where, it's a firm-based data and software, typically you're sending all the information to them, right? And they're processing all of those tasks. Who's responsible? What is their timeline to provide those reports to you? I will tell you that, I'll tell you a little bit about ours and some feedback that I got recently, and I've heard many times. We've got a client that's switching over to us because they said, we're dealing with a firm that I never get my reports on time, and I don't have access to the data. So even if I wanted to log in and look at it, I have no way to get into that. And so they're very frustrated, and they said, I don't want to do that anymore. You might think when you're looking at all of this, is this going to be death by apps, right? Am I, Robert, you've talked about all these various apps. Am I really going to get in over my head? Well, I say not necessarily, right? I mean, unfortunately, in today's world, right, it does feel like it, right? If any of us open our phones here, like I've got mine, right, and if I open it up and if I were to show you and start scrolling through my screen, right, we've all got a bunch of apps that we use. Make sure that you're just, selecting the right ones, think through the process, work with somebody like us who's familiar with these apps, who can help you choose the ones that are going to, that are really going to automate your process. We've got a client right now that we're working with that wanted to, they wanted to make change. They were struggling. We started setting this stuff up, and they came back and said, well, this automation really isn't working. We're still doing a bunch of stuff. And I'm scratching my head in email, like, I don't understand. Like, we set this up and we set this up, and I'm like, what do you mean you're not getting the automation? And she went back and she said, well, I'm having to export the data from here in Excel and export data from here in Excel, and then we're taking it over and we're doing all this stuff over here. And I'm like, but why are you doing that? It synchronizes to QuickBooks already, and we know that it's synchronizing because we've seen it. You just got to go in QuickBooks and run your stuff out of there. And they didn't understand what was going on. And so they set up these new apps, and then they went in and they created all of these export files in order to be able to use it. And so we're working with them to get them back on track and to fix that process. So, work with somebody that can, not only is just a reseller or something, but that actually understands the process. The nice thing about, basically all these apps that we're talking about, in today's world, all of this is scalable. We're paying per user per month. So, in years past, there was software out there that, you paid perpetual licensing and you had to buy all of it up front and a bunch of setup fees. And now, even on some of the larger scale accounting systems, they've gone to that same model, right? So Microsoft Dynamics Nav used to be tens of thousands of dollars, in licensing fees, and tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars in implementation fees. And they've now scaled that back to your monthly fee. Again, it's all based upon the number of users, but now you're paying anywhere from, several hundred to maybe a few $1,000s a month in, in licensing fees. And, and maybe you're only paying tens of thousands of dollars in setup fees instead of hundreds of thousands. So, different technology and different pricing models that are out there. Again, the nice thing is that we can integrate these tools. That's one of the nice things about QuickBooks, is there's a lot of solutions out there, not only by task, but also solutions available for specific industries. With that, Liz, another polling question, please.
All right, polling question number 6. It's easier to onboard new employees via an app because they are scalable, they eliminate paper, they reduce processing time, or none of the above. While the polling question is open, wanted to make sure to direct everyone's attention out to the chat box. We did go ahead and include that promo code and the registration link for the GovCon Summit out in the chat box. So if that's something you want to check out the registration page, see what's going on Wednesday and Thursday, definitely would encourage you to sign up and enjoy some of the content and see what best suits your needs there. So let us know if you have any questions about that. We're going to go ahead and close this polling question down now, share those results, and a little bit more of a tie here, Robert. We have 40% though say reduced processing time.
Yeah, this is, I guess we should have probably structured this question a little bit better, but really you're getting all of those. That you can be scalable, right? You're paying per user. We're eliminating paper that I talked about. You're reducing processing time because again, the employee is entering the data once, right? When they're filling it out online for you. And so, it's not the situation where they're filling out paper and now somebody's got to extract all of that. So I guess we can accept A, B, or C there, right? We're getting something out of all of these. All right, now let's see if we've got some other questions out there. I know we've got another polling question here in a couple of moments, but if we've got some Q&A.
Yes, we do. Jenny, did you want to go ahead and take that, or would you like me to keep it going with the Q&A?
That's fine. You can keep it going.
All right, thank you. All right, so we have a question from Nancy that came in earlier. Actually, we covered that. That was the question about timesheets, but Christine wanted to know, so this was earlier on, Robert, where you were talking about paper files. Christine wants to know, do you find the auditors are accepting electronic documents only without issue when supporting transactions? That's a great conversation topic. Thanks for that question, Christine.
Yeah, I mean, and I think there are some people that still think, oh, and again, especially like in the government contracting world, there still seems to be this stigma, simply think, well, we still got to keep paper, and that's not a true statement. Even the DCA guideline, the FAR guidelines are that, and y'all, to be clear here, right? Most of what we get anymore is not paper, right? We get an invoice in PDF via email. We get, all of these things, in soft copy. There never was a hard copy, right, to begin with. And it always kind of frustrates me. We go into businesses and we find them getting PDFs. And I've even seen it to be this, right? They get the PDF, they print it out, they write something on it or stamp it, and then they scan it and attach it back in. And I'm like, what are you doing, right? Why are we doing this? No, we don't have to have paper. The only real requirement from a document, again, this is in the FAR, I think I'd have to pull up the exact references. I think it's in FAR 4, but it's about document retention, and it's only that if you actually receive something in hard copy, and that was the original, and there never was, it was never originally sent like in PDF, you can scan it in and keep it, and then you just have to keep the original paper copy for 1 year if somebody wants to validate that scanned document. So that's the only requirement. And I've never come into any issues yet with, with having digital stuff. And in fact, again, prior to COVID, but even during COVID, right, a lot of these reviews and audits are happening remotely. And so we're simply uploading files, right? We're sending zip files or whatever, uploading them to a portal somewhere for these audits to occur.
Excellent, that's really helpful. Mimi asked if we could share the promo code for the summit. So I did respond with that, Mimi, along with the registration page. And maybe in just the next couple of minutes, Robert, I know that we didn't necessarily talk about this in great detail, but we do have an extra few minutes before we wrap up. Do you want to just highlight some of the presenters and topics that are going to be covered over the next couple of days via the summit?
Yeah, I can certainly do that. I will tell you that, some of what we have going on tomorrow, we're opening up the day in the main conference with a session called Q&A with DCAA. So we do have a couple of speakers from DCAA who are going to be there. They've got some questions already, and it's going to be an opportunity for you as well to be able to, to pipe in and get your questions answered. We have a number of software demonstrations that are occurring on both days, and so these are software that are designed specifically for government contractors. A couple of them include ICAT that I've already mentioned, ProCast, GovCon 365 is going to be in there, Our Timesheet, ProPricer are all doing demos. We have a number of attorneys and other accountants. And again, if you've been in the government contracting space and been to any of these conferences or stuff along the way, you've probably come across some of these people. Various topics from labor distribution to, what are the hot legal topics in government contract accounting? And you might be sitting there saying, well, why do you even have, attorneys, participating in a GovCon accounting conference? Well, there's always a legal side to many of these accounting topics. And in fact, we get a fair number of referrals from accountants, or from attorneys, I should say, right? So always a reason to have them involved. And the schedule for both days, for Wednesday and Thursday, we open up with a 90-minute session. So the Wednesday session is Q&A with DCAA. The Thursday session is a panel discussion. And then the rest of both days, you'll have multiple, either 2 or 3 options at every time slot to pick up one of these other, again, whether it's a demo or some other topic. So plenty of opportunity out there.
Thanks so much, Robert. Well, it's been a wonderful program. Before we wrap, Jenny, I wanted to ask if you have any questions that you want to make sure we cover. And of course, we have that final polling question too. So we'll take that final polling question, Jenny, and if there's any questions you want to make sure we cover, then you can take a turn after this. This is our final polling question. How likely are you to automate your bookkeeping? Not likely at all. I may automate a few tasks on my own, likely, but I may need some assistance, or 100%, but would prefer someone to do it all for me. So we'll leave this open just a bit longer here. Close this down. And thank you everyone for responding and sharing those results. All right, how can we get in touch with you and your team, Robert?
All right, so we've got our contact info up here. Questions come up, and as I said, if you're interested in, if you can't participate in the next couple of days, we'd love for you to participate, but if you can't, and you're curious about some of the software and apps, shoot us an email. Always happy to do a demo and walk somebody through it. Our email is support@leftbrainpro.com. We have a lot of information on our website at leftbrainpro.com, and you can find us on various social media platforms.
Awesome. Well, thank you. This was an excellent overview of so many different tools and platforms. So let me go ahead and just close in one moment, please. We can just bring us to that final slide, Robert. I want to remind everyone, as you close the GoToWebinar control panel, there will be a pop-up that will be a course survey. So we would love your feedback on the program today. And thank you, Lori. Lori says thank you. So really appreciate that early feedback. Definitely a great overview here today. You can watch the program recording from your from your Corsa dashboard. That will be uploaded this evening if you want to go back and kind of refresh on some of these apps that Robert discussed today. You can access your CPE certificate from your Corsa dashboard as well. That will populate for you in an hour. And the reference materials, the slides for today's presentation, will also be available to you directly on your Corsa dashboard. So you can find Corsa on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. I know Robert Jones and Left Brain Professionals is definitely on Facebook and LinkedIn as well. And you can join us next month. We'd love to have you. We're going to talk about audit strategies for government contractors. So Robert, you and Jenny just have done a phenomenal job planning out the full calendar, getting these programs lined up to really hit on some of the topics that are of most interest to government contractors. So thanks everyone for joining us. Robert sending our very best wishes for the summit over the next couple of days. Really appreciate all the work that you and your team have put into the summit, and we'll look forward to having you back with us in August for your next presentation. So until then, have a great week, everyone, and take care.